Blind eyes don't usually track movement through a rifle scope, but Ariana Linari had never needed to see what she killed. In the fortress estate of Don Sandro Politano, silence was currency, and the nanny who smelled of lavender was paid to be invisible. The insurgents rappelled down the north face at midnight, expecting velvet-draped mobsters and poorly trained bodyguards. Instead, they descended into the kill zone of a woman who could hear a heartbeat through reinforced glass and calculate bullet drop by the whisper of wind through shattered windows. Ariana wasn't just the fragile caretaker who sang lullabies to the Don's daughter. She was Subject Zero from a buried government program, hiding behind clouded eyes in the one place no one thought to search. And when the first window exploded inward, the porcelain teacup fell from her hand, the maid's apron came off, and the weapon she'd buried beneath the nursery floorboards came out. The estate breathed in winter rhythm. Ariana Linari stood at the nursery window, her milky eyes reflecting nothing of the alpine landscape beyond, yet she saw it more clearly than anyone with functioning retinas ever could. The snow fell in whispers, each flake a distinct percussion against frozen glass, building a three-dimensional map in her mind. 22 meters to the perimeter wall, 47 to the tree line. The wind came from the northwest at approximately 15 kilometers per hour, carrying the scent of pine resin and the distant diesel exhaust of the patrol vehicle making its rounds. Behind her, little Sophia Politano slept in her canopied bed, and her heartbeat a steady 72 beats per minute, the sound so familiar now that Ariana could detect the slightest arrhythmia from across the room. The child's breathing was deep and untroubled, accompanied by the soft rustle of Egyptian cotton sheets worth more than most people earned in a month. This world of bulletproof windows and armed men disguised as gardeners was the closest thing to peace Ariana had known in 7 years. The floorboards in the east corridor compressed under heavy footsteps. Sandro. She recognized the asymmetric gait, the slight favor of his left leg from an old bullet wound he thought no one noticed. He would pass the nursery, pause for exactly 3 seconds to ensure his daughter was safe, or then continue to his study where he would pour himself 2 fingers of Macallan and review the day's ledgers until the small hours. The pause came right on schedule. "She is dreaming of horses again," Ariana said quietly, not turning from the window. Her Italian carried the careful precision of someone who had learned the language in a laboratory rather than a home. Her pulse elevates slightly. "Happy dreams." Sandro's hand had been resting on the doorframe. She heard the soft creak of wood as he shifted his weight, the minute rustle of his Brioni suit jacket. "You can tell this from across the room? In the dark?" "The dark makes no difference to me, signore." A pause. She could hear him processing this, the skepticism mixing with that peculiar superstition wealthy men developed when surrounded by too many yes men and too few honest answers. He didn't respond, merely continued his journey to the study, his footsteps receding into the labyrinth of his fortress. Ariana permitted herself a small smile. Sandro Politano was a dangerous man by any reasonable measure. He controlled shipping routes from Genoa to Marseille, owned judges and police commissioners, and had allegedly ordered the deaths of 17 rivals in the past decade alone. His estate was a testament to paranoid wealth, reinforced walls, rotating guard shifts, thermal cameras, pressure sensors in the gardens. He believed himself untouchable here, a king in his concrete castle. The irony was almost cruel. All his precautions were designed to keep threats out, and never imagining that the greatest weapon in his home wore a maid's uniform and navigated by echolocation. 3 floors below, she tracked Sandro's progress through the mansion. The distinctive squeak of the study door's brass hinges, the heavy crystal decanter lifted from the mahogany bar, the whiskey hitting the glass with a specific pitch, that told her he'd poured exactly 45 milliliters. The leather chair exhaling as he settled into it, followed by the precise metallic click of his fountain pen being uncapped. She had memorized every sound in this house. The specific groan of the third stair from the landing. The frequency of the antique clock in the foyer that ran 11 seconds fast. The pattern of the head of security's radio checks every 23 minutes, staggered to prevent predictability, yet predictable in its very randomness. She knew which guard smoked contraband cigarettes on the North Terrace and which one sent encrypted messages to a woman who was decidedly not his wife. These details were not the observations of a devoted employee. They were the tactical database of a soldier who had been trained to turn any environment into either sanctuary or slaughterhouse depending on necessity. Below, Sandro's pen scratched across paper in the distinctive rhythm of his signature. He was signing death warrants, probably, or approving smuggling manifests, the small violence of paperwork that kept his empire running. He felt powerful in this moment, she knew, safe, in control. The wind shifted outside, coming now from the northeast. A front was moving in, temperature dropping. The snow would intensify within the hour. She calculated sight lines through the shifting precipitation, muscle memory from another life. The north face would provide the best approach vector for an assault team. Limited camera coverage due to the historical preservation requirements of the estate's facade. Natural blind spots. Not that anyone knew where to find her. Not anymore. Sophia's heartbeat remained steady. Sandro's pen continued its scratching cadence. The snow whispered its secrets against the glass. For now, everything was exactly as it should be. The security grid died at 004723. Ariana registered the absence before the backup generators could compensate, that half-second of pure silence when every electronic hum in the estate ceased simultaneously. The climate control system, the hidden servers in the basement, the electromagnetic locks on the reinforced doors. All of it gone in a coordinated blackout that spoke of military-grade electromagnetic pulse technology, not the brute force methods of rival crime families. Her hand moved to the hem of her skirt, where a ceramic blade was sewn into the lining. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the corridors in amber, but the security cameras remained dark. The motion sensors stayed blind. Whoever had killed the system had done it surgically, preserving only the functions that wouldn't impede their movement. This was not a hit. This was an extraction. They had found her. 3 floors down, Sandro's chair scraped against marble. She heard his sharp intake of breath, the rustle of his jacket as he reached for the pistol he kept in the desk's hidden drawer. His heart rate spiked from 68 to 94 beats per minute in seconds. The intercom button clicked uselessly. Once, twice, 3 times. Marco, report. His voice carried through the walls, tense but controlled. The voice of a man accustomed to crisis. Dante, someone answer me. No one would. Ariana tilted her head, filtering through the acoustic landscape of the estate. The usual sounds were absent. No radio chatter from the guard posts, no footsteps on patrol routes. The man who should have been stationed at the east gate had a distinctive shuffle from an old knee injury. She couldn't hear it. The overnight cook, who always had the kitchen radio, tuned to a station that played American jazz at unreasonable volumes. Silence. What she did hear made her blood crystallize. The whisper of repelling ropes against stone. North face, exactly as she'd calculated. Multiple lines, descending in synchronized rhythm that suggested special operations training. At least 6 operators, probably 8. The distinctive creak of tactical boots finding purchase on the decorative stonework. The muffled click of carbines being readied, suppressors already attached. In the study, Sandro had moved to the safe behind the Renaissance painting. She heard the biometric lock disengage, the heavy door swinging open. He would be reaching for the backup radio now, the encrypted line to his underboss in the city. "This is Politano. We have a breach. North perimeter. Send everyone." His words came fast, clipped. "I don't care if you have to wake the whole organization. The Rossi family has made their move. I want Dante's head on—" The windows exploded inward, not all at once, but in a cascading sequence that demonstrated tactical precision. Drawing room, library, conservatory. The sound of imploding glass was almost musical in its coordination, each breach 3 seconds apart, giving operators time to clear and advance. Flashbang grenades followed, their detonations muffled by custom dampeners designed to disorient without causing permanent structural damage. They wanted the building intact. They wanted minimal collateral damage. They wanted her alive. Ariana moved on instinct, crossing the nursery in 4 silent steps. Sophia stirred but didn't wake, her child's mind still cushioned in dreams of horses and summer meadows. Ariana's hands found the window seat, fingers tracing the seam she'd cut into the upholstery 6 months ago. The hidden compartment opened with a soft pop of released pressure. The rifle case was exactly where she'd left it. Polymer composite, non-metallic, invisible to the standard sweeps the security team conducted. She assembled the weapon by touch in 17 seconds, each component sliding into place with the mechanical certainty of muscle memory that predated her employment in this house by nearly a decade. Below, Sandro had abandoned the radio. She heard his footsteps pounding toward the grand staircase, the Beretta now in his hand. He was moving toward Sophia's room, paternal instinct overriding tactical sense. He would get himself killed in the corridors, picked off by operators who could see in the dark and moved like smoke through spaces. The first guard's body was discovered with Sandro's own hands. Marco, his head of security, sprawled at the base of the stairs with his throat cut so precisely that he'd bled out in seconds. Professional? Surgical? The kind of kill that required coming within touching distance of a trained combatant without alerting him. "Rossi doesn't have people like this," Sandro whispered, the words barely audible but carried to Ariana through the acoustic channel of the central stairwell. Fear had entered his voice now, cutting through the bravado. "What the hell is this?" Ariana chambered around, the sound deliberately loud. From the floor below, she heard the operators freeze, recalibrating their approach. They had expected her to run. They were wrong. Sandro fired twice into the shadows of the drawing room, the Beretta's report deafening in the enclosed space. The muzzle flash illuminated 3 figures in tactical black, already flanking his position with the fluid coordination of a wolf pack. He dove behind the Louis XVI settee, expensive upholstery offering psychological comfort against bullets it could never stop. "Don Politano." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, processed through a modulator that stripped it of identifying characteristics. "We're not here for you. Send out the woman and you'll see morning." Sandro's breathing was ragged, his heart hammering at 130 beats per minute. Ariana tracked it from the servants' passage behind the north wall, her fingers trailing along the wooden paneling as she moved through the hidden network of corridors that honeycombed the old estate. The architects had built them for discretion, allowing staff to move unseen. She had memorized every inch within her first week. "What, woman?" Sandro shouted back, buying time he didn't understand he needed. "You've killed my men for nothing. There's no—" A 3-round burst stitched across the settee, close enough to make him flinch. Suppressed weapons, subsonic ammunition. They wanted him compliant, not dead. The lead operator was moving to cut off the main exit, while 2 others advanced from the shattered conservatory entrance. Standard room clearing procedure. Sandro was boxed in, and he knew it. His hand moved to the backup magazine. 2 rounds left in the pistol, 15 in the spare. Against trained operators with night vision and automatic weapons, it might as well have been a harsh word. The hidden panel exploded outward, not opened, not carefully unlatched. Ariana's boot heel struck the release mechanism with enough force to tear the antique wood from its hinges, the panel crashing into the drawing room like a breaching charge. She came through the opening in the same motion, the maid's uniform incongruous against the matte black rifle that seemed to weigh nothing in her hands. Sandro stared. The fragile woman who shuffled carefully through doorways and needed assistance downstairs moved with the precision of a striking viper. Her milky eyes, usually downcast and apologetic, were wide open and locked on a target he couldn't see. The nearest operator swung his carbine toward the new threat. Ariana was faster. The rifle barked once, the suppressor doing little to quiet the heavy caliber round. The operator's night vision exploded in a shower of sparks and polymers, the bullet continuing through to punch a crater in the man's helmet. He dropped without a sound, nervous system shut down before his brain could process the trauma. She was already moving, crossing to the shattered window in 4 strides while chambering another round. The hem of her skirt whispered against her legs, white apron still impossibly clean against the chaos. She kicked aside a shard of glass, and for one surreal moment, Sandro watched her mount the heavy rifle on the snow-dusted windowsill with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had done this 1,000 times. Her clouded eyes stared down the scope at nothing he could perceive. "Get down, signore," she said, her voice stripped of its usual deference. This was command cadence, the tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life-or-death circumstances. The floor. "Now!" Sandro dropped, instinct overriding confusion. The rifle spoke twice in rapid succession. Through the broken windows, he heard the wet impact of rounds finding flesh, followed by the tumbling crash of bodies falling from rappelling lines. Someone screamed, the sound cut short by a third shot that Ariana fired without adjusting her position. She was tracking targets by sound, compensating for wind and distance with calculations that should have required sight. "6 down," she murmured, more to herself than him. 2 in the east corridor, 1 in the kitchen, 3 still outside. Her head tilted fractionally, processing acoustic data he couldn't begin to interpret. They're regrouping, 45 seconds before they adapt their approach. The remaining operator in the drawing room made his move, rising from cover with his weapon trained on Ariana's exposed back. Sandro opened his mouth to shout a warning. Ariana pivoted on her heel and fired from the hip, the bullet catching the man in the throat above his body armor. He collapsed against the grand piano, fingers scrabbling uselessly at the catastrophic wound. She turned back to the window, as if nothing had happened. Sandro's hands were shaking. Not from fear of the operators anymore, but from the sudden, terrible understanding that he had invited something into his home that was far more dangerous than any enemy he'd ever faced. The blind nanny who smelled of lavender and sang gentle lullabies had just executed 3 trained killers in under 20 seconds. "Who are you?" he whispered. Ariana's finger found the trigger again, contracting movement in the gardens that existed only in her acoustic map. "Right now, I'm the only reason you and your daughter are still breathing." The rifle thundered, and another body hit the snow. The snow had intensified, each flake now a data point in Ariana's sensory map. She tracked the storm's rhythm while her finger rested against the trigger guard, patient as a spider in its web. On the roof, boots scraped against slate tiles, 4 distinct patterns of movement converging on the skylight above the grand staircase. "They're not here for you," she said, her voice clinical as she made minute adjustments to the rifle's position. "They're here for me." Sandro had pressed himself against the wall, his beretta hanging uselessly at his side. Blood from the dead operator was seeping into the Persian rug, pooling around the legs of furniture worth more than most homes. "That's insane! Who sends a military strike team for a—" The rifle interrupted him. Through the window, a figure tumbled from the north parapet, his repelling line severed by a round that had travelled through falling snow and found flesh with impossible accuracy. The body hit the fountain in the courtyard with a sound like a side of beef dropped from height. "For a what, signore? A blind woman?" Ariana's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Project Artemis, auditory targeting program. They spent 8 years training us to kill without sight, building soldiers who could operate in conditions where vision was compromised, smoke, darkness, sandstorms." She fired again, and somewhere in the gardens someone stopped breathing. Then they decided we knew too much and tried to decommission the program. Permanently. Above them, the footsteps on the roof had frozen. The operators were recalculating, processing the fact that their approach had been compromised by someone who should have been blind to their movements. Ariana could hear their confusion in the hesitation of their steps, the way they'd shifted to non-verbal communications. Hand signals wouldn't help them. She wasn't watching. She was listening to the pressure their boots exerted on tiles, the way their tactical gear shifted with each breath, the distinctive frequency of their heartbeats elevated by adrenaline and altitude. "The vibrations travel through the structure," she explained, tracking their repositioning with minute movements of her head. "Stone and timber conduct sound better than air. I can hear them thinking up there, hear the way their muscles tense before they move. One of them is injured, left knee, probably from the fall training. He favors it by 0.3 seconds every third step." Sandro's mouth had gone dry. "That's not possible. You hired me because you thought blindness made me harmless, invisible. A woman who couldn't see your business, couldn't identify your associates, couldn't testify about what happened in your home." She chambered another round with practiced efficiency. "You were half right. I am invisible, just not the way you thought." The operators on the roof split up, moving to opposite corners in an attempt to divide her attention. Tactical sound. One of them pulled a flashbang from his vest, the distinctive weight shift and fabric rustle giving him away. Ariana tracked his arm motion through 3 floors of solid architecture, calculating trajectory by the whisper of the grenade leaving his hand. She put a round through the roof. The explosion came from above, muffled by the body that had collapsed over the skylight. The grenade tumbled from dead fingers, detonating harmlessly in the snow-covered gardens. The remaining operators scattered, their discipline fracturing as they realized they were being hunted by prey that could see through walls. "East corridor," Ariana said, her attention already shifting. 3 men stacked outside the library. They think the interior walls will protect them. She pivoted away from the window, settling into a shooting position that aimed at what appeared to be a solid plaster wall decorated with 17th century portraiture. Her milky eyes stared at the painting of some long-dead Politano ancestor, seeing nothing and everything simultaneously. "The library shares a wall with this room," she continued, her voice taking on the lecturing tone of an instructor. "Lath and plaster over brick, built in 1847 when materials were expensive, but labor was cheap. The brick is only 1 layer deep, standard thickness. The rounds I'm using will penetrate with minimal deflection if I account for the density differential." She fired 3 times in quick succession, each shot placed in a different section of the wall. The heavy rounds punched through plaster brick and the ornate oak paneling on the opposite side. The portraits of Sandro's ancestors shuddered on their hooks, dust cascading from the impact points. And from beyond the wall came the wet sounds of catastrophic trauma, followed by the crash of bodies hitting the library's marble floor. Someone tried to scream, but managed only a gurgling wheeze. Then silence. Ariana lowered the rifle slightly, listening to the aftermath. 3 confirmed. The one on the left is still breathing, but he's got maybe 90 seconds before he bleeds out. Femoral artery. Sandro stared at the wall, at the 3 smoking holes that had punched through to deliver death to men he couldn't see. His hand trembled as he crossed himself, a gesture from childhood that his criminal life had all but erased. "Madonna Santa," he whispered. "What are you?" "Right now?" Ariana tilted her head, tracking new movement from the floor above. "Your daughter's best chance at seeing dawn." The rifle went back into Ariana's hands with the casual intimacy of a familiar tool. She moved towards the corridor with silent efficiency, leaving Sandro to scramble after her, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass. His breath came in sharp bursts, fight-or-flight chemicals flooding a system more accustomed to boardroom intimidation than actual combat. "We're getting Sophia," Ariana said. It wasn't a suggestion. "Like hell we are. You're going to tell me what—" She spun on him so fast he nearly fired the Beretta on reflex, her clouded eyes fixed on a point just left of his face, close enough to be unsettling. "Your daughter's heartbeat just spiked to 98 beats per minute. She's waking up in approximately 4 minutes, and she will start crying because she's frightened and alone. Those cries will give away her position to anyone within 50 meters. Her voice was surgical room cold. "So you can demand answers, or you can help me keep her alive. Choose quickly, signore." Sandro's jaw worked, authority colliding with the terrible mathematics of the situation. He was a man who gave orders, not followed them. But he was also a father, and that instinct overrode decades of carefully cultivated pride. "Lead," he said hoarsely. They moved through the darkened hallways, emergency lighting casting amber pools that did nothing to help Ariana and barely helped Sandro. She navigated the maze of his own home with more confidence than he could manage, her fingers trailing along the wall for orientation while the rifle remained ready in her other hand. Her head swiveled constantly, processing an acoustic landscape he couldn't begin to perceive. "Why my home?" Sandro whispered, unable to stop himself. "Why hide here?" "Because men like you ask fewer questions than honest people. You wanted discretion. I needed anonymity. The arrangement was mutually beneficial until tonight." She paused at an intersection, head tilted. "They're evacuating. I've eliminated 14 operators. They're regrouping for either extraction or a final push with heavy ordnance." 14. The number was impossible. In less than 10 minutes? "I'm expensive to create, signore. The government doesn't tolerate losses on that scale. They'll either pull back to reassess or level the building and claim gas leak. We have maybe 8 minutes before they decide which." They rounded the corner toward the main staircase. Ariana stopped so abruptly that Sandro nearly collided with her. Her hand came up in a halt gesture. Every muscle in her body suddenly taut as piano wire. The maid's uniform she still wore seemed like a costume now, a sheep's clothing that had never quite fit the wolf underneath. "Sweeper," she breathed. "Second floor landing, waiting in the alcove behind the Baroque mirror." Sandro strained to see anything in the gloom. The landing was 30 feet away, shadow-drowned and silent. "I don't see. He's been there for 3 minutes. Suppressed breathing. Heart rate at 52 beats per minute. That's operator at rest, the kind of patience they teach for long-duration hides." Her hand moved to her hair, and fingers finding the simple pin that had held her bun in place. When she pulled it free, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and Sandro saw that the pin was titanium, sharpened to a needlepoint. "Stay here, don't move, don't breathe loudly." She set the rifle against the wall and walked towards the landing. Not crept. Walked. Her footsteps deliberately audible, the shuffling gait of the blind woman returning. Harmless, confused, lost in her own employer's home during a crisis. She even brought her hands up in front of her, fingers spread in the universal gesture of the sightless navigating unfamiliar space. The sweeper took the bait. He emerged from the alcove with his knife already drawn, closing the distance in 3 silent steps. Professional. No hesitation. The blade angled for her kidney. A killing stroke designed to drop her quietly. His other hand reached for her mouth to stifle any scream. Ariana moved like silk, catching fire. Her hand intercepted his knife arm at the wrist, redirecting the blade past her torso with a precision that suggested she'd known exactly where it would be. The titanium pin in her other hand came up in a blur, punching through the soft tissue under his jaw and angling upward into the brain stem. The sweeper's eyes went wide, synapses firing chaotically as catastrophic trauma shut down motor function. She held him there for 1 second, feeling his pulse hammer against her hand, then drove her palm into his throat with enough force to collapse his trachea. The combined trauma was redundantly lethal. He was dead before his knees hit the floor, the knife clattering uselessly against marble. Aunt Ariana lowered the body with surprising gentleness, then returned to collect her rifle as if she'd merely stepped aside to close a window. Sandro stood frozen, the Beretta hanging limp in his hand. He'd seen men killed before, had ordered deaths himself. But those had been business. Transactional. This was art of a kind he'd never witnessed, violence so refined it approached the aesthetic. "You didn't even slow down," he said. Ariana pulled her hair back, refastening it with the blood-slicked pin. "Sophia's awake now. We need to move." The nursery door hung open, swinging gently on hinges that Sandro had personally selected for their silence. Sophia sat upright in her bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit that went everywhere with her, eyes wide with the confusion of a 5-year-old woken into chaos. When she saw her father, Archie started to cry. "Papa, I heard loud noises. Shh, Tesoro, shh." Sandro holstered the Beretta and scooped her up, feeling her small arms lock around his neck with desperate strength. Over her shoulder, he watched Ariana move to the window, scanning the grounds with senses he still couldn't fully comprehend. "They've pulled back to the tree line," she said, regrouping at the perimeter. "I count 8 remaining, maybe 9. There." She stopped mid-sentence, her head snapping to the side like she'd been slapped. Outside, nothing visible had changed. But Sandro saw Ariana's face go pale, saw her free hand move to her ear as if she could physically block out something unbearable. The high-frequency emitters activated simultaneously, invisible spears of sound that turned her gift into a weapon against her. They'd placed them during the initial breach, small devices no larger than a phone, positioned throughout the estate at calculated intervals. The sound was above normal human hearing range, imperceptible to Sandro and Sophia, but to Ariana's enhanced auditory cortex it was like staring into the sun. Her sensory map of the world dissolved into white noise. "No!" she gasped, staggering against the window frame. The rifle wavered in her hands. No, they couldn't have. The equipment was destroyed. The prototypes were... "What's happening?" Sandro demanded, watching her deteriorate in real time. The confident operator who'd killed 14 men was suddenly vulnerable. Her milky eyes squeezed shut as if that could somehow help block out the acoustic assault. "White noise protocol. Scrambles auditory processing. Everything sounds like screaming static. I can't..." She tried to track movement outside, but her head swung wildly, unable to lock onto any signal in the overwhelming noise. "I can't hear anything. I'm blind." For the first time that night, actual fear entered her voice. Through the window, Sandro saw them emerge from the tree line, tactical lights now visible, no longer bothering with stealth. They moved with the confidence of hunters who'd just clipped their prey's wings. 9 operators in full combat gear, advancing across the snow-covered lawn in a coordinated formation that would put them at the house in under 90 seconds. "They're coming," Sandro said. "Straight approach, 9 of them." Ariana's hands were shaking on the rifle. She tried to raise it, tried to aim. But without her acoustic targeting, she was what she'd always pretended to be. A blind woman holding a weapon she couldn't properly use. I can't see them. Can't hear them. I'm useless." Then I'll be your eyes. Sandro passed Sophia to the corner, where she huddled with her rabbit, and moved to stand behind Ariana. His hand settled on her shoulders, feeling the tension vibrating through her frame. Tell me what you need. She took a shuddering breath, forcing down panic through sheer discipline. Distance, position, movement, you have to be my spotter. I don't know how to... Then learn fast, signore. Your daughter's life depends on it. Sandro looked out the window, trying to translate what he saw into useful information. The operators were crossing the courtyard now, maybe 50 meters out. They're in a V formation. Lead man is slightly ahead. Which direction are they moving, exactly? Straight toward us, maybe 10 degrees to the left of center. Ariana's breathing steadied, falling into a combat rhythm he recognized from old wars. She was compartmentalizing, pushing the fear down into a box and locking it. Wind? He licked his finger, held it near the broken window. Coming from my right, not strong. Not good enough. Look at the snow. Which direction are the flakes moving? Sandro focused on the falling snow, seeing it for the first time as data rather than decoration. Right to left, moving fast. Speed estimate. Compare it to something. Like a car on a city street. Maybe 30 kilometers per hour. Ariana made the calculations, her enhanced mind compensating for the lost sensory input with pure mathematics. Call the shot. When the lead man reaches the fountain, tell me. The operator advanced, his boots crunching on snow that Ariana could no longer hear. Sandro watched him clear the garden statuary, approach the fountain where a body still floated face down in icy water. Now, Sandro said. The rifle barked. Through the window, the lead operator's head snapped back, his helmet cracking under the impact. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Hit! Sandro breathed. Center mass, he's down. Next target, fast. Second man, 3 o'clock from the fountain. Moving right, he's diving for cover behind the hedge. Tell me when he stops. He stopped, behind the boxwood. I can see his shoulder. Ariana adjusted, her muscles moving through calculations that existed somewhere between instinct and science. Shoot! The round punched through decorative hedge and tactical armor both. The man convulsed once and went still. 7 left. And they were learning, spreading out, making themselves harder targets. But Sandro's fear had transformed into something else now, something colder and more useful. He'd spent 30 years learning to read men, to predict movement, to see patterns in chaos. Tonight, that skill set would keep his daughter alive. Third target, he said, his voice steady now. Running for the west entrance, fast, very fast. Ariana's finger found the trigger. Tell me when he commits, when he can't change direction. Sandro watched the operator sprint across open ground, watched him plant his foot for the final push towards the doorway. Now. The rifle spoke, and another hunter fell. The east wall exploded inward with a concussive blast that sent century-old plaster raining down like hail. Breaching charge, military grade, the kind that turned architectural features into shrapnel. Sandro threw himself over Sophia as debris peppered his back, feeling the sting of a dozen minor cuts through his jacket. When he looked up, 3 operators were pouring through the smoking hole, moving with the mechanical efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times. Kitchen! Ariana barked, already moving despite her sensory blindness. Go, now! Sandro grabbed Sophia and ran, following Ariana's retreating form down the servants' stairs. Behind them, boots pounded on marble, and tactical radios crackling with coordinated movement. They were herding them, he realized, pushing them toward a kill zone where the civilians could be separated from the asset. The industrial kitchen sprawled across the mansion's ground floor, a temple of stainless steel and commercial equipment that fed Sandro's elaborate dinner parties. Ariana hit the door at full speed, her shoulder slamming it open as she swept the space with useless eyes. The white noise emitters were everywhere now, their signal stronger here, turning her enhanced hearing into a liability that left her staggering. "The pantry!" Sandro gasped, shoving Sophia towards the reinforced door. "It locks from inside. The steel won't matter if we're dead." Ariana cut him off. She'd dropped the rifle, useless now at close quarters. Her hands moved across the prep counter, fingers finding the knife block by touch. She selected 2 blades, testing their weight with the professional assessment of someone who'd been trained to kill with anything. "Lock her in, then get ready to tell me who's where." The first operator came through the kitchen door in a textbook entry, weapon up, scanning for targets. Sandro opened his mouth to call it out, but Ariana was already moving. She'd heard the door hinges despite the static, some fragment of acoustic data penetrating the jamming. The chef's knife left her hand in a flat spin, burying itself in the man's throat just above his body armor. He went down gurgling, and she was already closing the distance. The second operator swung his carbine toward her, but she'd dropped below his sight line, sliding across the recently mopped floor like a base runner stealing home. Her remaining knife punched upward through the gap between his vest plates, finding the soft tissue of his armpit and the axillary artery beneath. He stumbled backward, crashing into the industrial dishwasher, blood pressure dropping catastrophically. The third operator was smarter. He'd held position at the door, using his dying teammates as bait while he tracked Ariana's movement. When she rose from her slide, he had her dead to rights, finger taking up slack on the trigger. Sandro shot him twice with the Beretta, the round sparking off the man's helmet, but buying Ariana the half-second she needed. She grabbed the nearest pot from the commercial range, the one that had been simmering stock for tomorrow's osso buco, and hurled 8 liters of boiling liquid into the operator's face. His scream was immediate and animal, hands clawing at his melting features. Ariana kicked his legs out from under him and finished it with a brutal stomp to the throat. 3 more came through the door in rapid succession, learning from their predecessors' mistakes. No hesitation now, just suppressing fire that chewed through stainless steel and shattered the window, looking out onto the herb garden. Ariana dove behind the center island, and Sandro saw her face twisted in concentration, trying to filter useful sound from the overwhelming static. "The steam!" she gasped, pointing at the commercial range where a dozen burners still roared at full heat. "The water! Turn everything on. I need acoustic variation." Sandro didn't question it. He cranked every valve, or every faucet, filling the industrial sinks until they overflowed. Water cascaded onto the hot griddle with an explosive hiss, filling the kitchen with clouds of vapor that reduced visibility to arm's length. The overhead ventilation system roared to life automatically, adding another layer of noise to the chaos. And somehow, impossibly, Ariana's expression cleared. "The emitters work on a single frequency," she explained, her hands already moving to unbutton her maid's uniform. "But natural sounds, water, steam, mechanical vibration, those hit different frequencies. It's not clean, but I can work with interference." She stripped off the uniform down to the tank top beneath, and Sandro finally saw what she'd kept hidden under long sleeves and professional modesty. Her arms were covered in tattoos, but not the decorative ink of civilians. These were precise, clinical. Barcodes and alphanumeric strings that ran from wrist to shoulder. Serial numbers, identification codes, the permanent marking of government property. Subject 0. One tattoo read, just below her left shoulder. Project Artemis, Unit 7. Asset classification, extreme risk. She caught him staring. Surprised they didn't just brand me? Before he could answer, she'd grabbed a stack of ceramic plates from the drying rack and began hurling them at calculated points around the kitchen. They shattered against walls, counters, and equipment, creating a cascading symphony of breaking porcelain that masked her movement as she circled toward the operator's position. The steam was thick enough now that Sandro could barely see her, just a ghost moving through the white clouds. He heard impacts, grunts, or the wet crack of bone breaking. One operator stumbled backward through the vapor, his arm bent at an angle that made Sandro's stomach turn. Another fell sideways into a prep table, his face a ruin. When the steam finally cleared, Ariana stood in the center of the kitchen, breathing hard, covered in blood that mostly wasn't hers. 6 operators lay scattered across the floor in various states of permanent stillness. The white noise emitters were still screaming their ultrasonic assault, but she'd adapted, learned to fight through the sensory deprivation the way she'd probably been trained to fight through tear gas and flashbangs. She looked at Sandro with those clouded eyes, and he saw something in her expression that might have been an apology. "There's more coming," she said. "There's always more." The safe room had been Sandro's pride, a panic room built to withstand anything short of military-grade ordnance. Steel-reinforced walls, redundant locks, its own air supply. He'd commissioned it after the Benedetti family tried to kill him in 2019, never imagining he'd be using it to protect a blind assassin and his terrified daughter from a government death squad. Sophia hadn't stopped crying since the kitchen. She clutched her father with one hand and her rabbit with the other, face buried in his shoulder, trying to make the nightmare disappear through force of will. Sandro held her against his chest, feeling each sob like a knife between his ribs, while Ariana worked the bolt on a rifle she'd salvaged from a dead operator. "The door won't hold," she said, matter of fact as a weather report. Blood seeped through her tank top from a gash across her ribs, where a bullet had carved a groove through flesh without hitting anything vital. She'd barely acknowledged it. "They'll use a thermic lance, maybe 40 seconds of cutting before the locks fail. Then we're trapped." Sandro's voice was hollow. He'd built this room as a fortress, never considering it might become a tomb. "Trapped is relative." Ariana tilted her head, processing sounds beyond the room's insulation. Through the white noise that still plagued her hearing, she caught something else, a rhythmic thumping that vibrated through the building's bones. They brought air support, helicopter, a H-6 Little Bird, probably. Light attack configuration. It's holding position over the south lawn, running thermal scans to track our location through the walls. The cutting started, exactly as she'd predicted. A brilliant point of white-hot light appeared at the top of the door, beginning its methodical journey through hardened steel. Molten metal dripped onto the floor, hissing where it met the Persian rug Sandro had dragged in to make the space more comfortable. The air filled with acrid smoke and the metallic stench of superheated alloy. Sandro pulled Sophia tighter. "Is there anything in your training for this? Some miracle escape?" "My training covered 37 ways to die with dignity." Ariana checked the rifle's magazine. 8 rounds. Against how many operators remained outside, backed by helicopter support? The mathematics were unkind. None of them involved taking a 5-year-old with me. The cutting continued its precise arc. 10 seconds. 20. The lock mechanism was glowing red now, metal fatigue spreading like cancer through the reinforced structure. Outside, tactical radios coordinated the final push. They'd breach hard and fast, overwhelming any resistance through sheer volume of fire. Ariana moved to the door, positioning herself directly in front of where it would swing open. Sandro realized with cold horror what she was doing. "No, you can't just—" "When the door opens, they'll fire on the first target. That's doctrine. Eliminate the immediate threat before assessing the space." Her voice remained steady, professional, the tone of someone explaining a recipe. "I'll draw the fire. You keep Sophia behind the desk. The steel frame will provide some cover. When you hear the helicopter's rotors change pitch, that's your window. They'll be repositioning to provide overwatch. Run for the east terrace. There's a service entrance. You'll be dead in 3 seconds. Yes. She said it without drama, a simple acknowledgement of tactical reality. But Sophia will have 30 seconds she wouldn't have otherwise. Use them well, signore. The lock gave way with a tortured shriek of failing metal. The door exploded inward, propelled by a breaching charge that turned it into a multi-ton projectile. Ariana had already moved, stepping into the opening with her arms spread wide, making herself the largest possible target. The operators fired on instinct. 3 carbines on full auto, rounds designed to penetrate body armor and continue through to the organs beneath. Ariana's body jerked with the impacts, crimson blooms spreading across her tank top as bullets found flesh. She staggered backward, legs failing, but her hands remained locked on the rifle. "Subject 0 is down," someone shouted into a radio. "Moving to secure the package." Outside, the helicopter adjusted its position, rotor wash sending snow into whirling vortexes. The rhythmic thump of the blades penetrated even the white noise jamming, a mechanical heartbeat that grew louder as the aircraft descended for a better angle. Ariana fell to her knees, blood spreading beneath her in an expanding pool. Her breathing came in wet gasps, punctured lung making each inhalation agony. The rifle wavered in hands that no longer had the strength to hold it steady, but she could still hear. Through the pain and the static and the dying signals of her own body, she could hear that helicopter. Could track its position by the Doppler shift of its rotors, could calculate its altitude by the pressure wave it generated, could time its movement to the microsecond. She raised the rifle one final time. The operators were moving past her, focused on the real prize, the Don and his daughter cowering behind inadequate cover. Their weapons tracked towards the desk, fingers taking up slack on triggers. Ariana fired. The round traveled through the broken safe room door, across the master suite, through the shattered window, and up into the night sky, where it found the helicopter's cockpit. The pilot never saw it coming. One moment he was adjusting altitude for his thermal imaging operator, at the next his skull was fragmenting under supersonic impact. The helicopter lurched sideways, dead hands on controls that no longer mattered. Its tail rotor clipped the mansion's south tower, sending the aircraft into an uncontrolled spin. It completed one full rotation before gravity took over, dropping the multi-ton machine directly onto the squad of operators positioned on the south lawn. The explosion lit the night like dawn, fuel igniting in a fireball that turned snow to steam and men to ash. The concussion wave shattered every remaining window in the mansion, sending a pressure pulse through the rooms that knocked operators off their feet. In the safe room, the 3 men who'd been advancing on Sophia froze, processing the sudden absence of their air support and half their ground team. That hesitation cost them everything. Sandro had grabbed a fallen carbine, and at this range, even a mobster who practiced twice a year at a private range could hit center mass. When the silence finally returned, broken only by the crackling of flames outside, Ariana lay in the spreading pool of her own blood. Her clouded eyes stared at nothing, chest rising and falling in increasingly shallow movements. Sandro knelt beside her, Sophia still clutched against him. "You saved us. Why would you—" "Because she dreams of horses," Ariana whispered, each word costing her. "And that matters more than anything they turned me into." Her hand found his, squeezed once, then went still. The fire from the crashed helicopter painted the snow orange, casting dancing shadows across the master suite's ruined walls. Sandro held pressure on Ariana's wounds with strips torn from bedsheets that had cost 4,000 euros and now served as field dressings. Sophia had finally stopped crying, shock setting in, her small body trembling against his side. Ariana's breathing had stabilized into something that wasn't quite dying, but wasn't sustainable either. 3 bullet wounds, maybe 4. Sandro had lost count in the chaos of trying to keep her blood inside her body. Her eyes had closed at some point, those clouded irises finally hidden, making her look almost peaceful despite the carnage surrounding them. "Stay with me," Sandro said, pressing harder on the worst wound. "I have doctors. Real doctors, not the kind who asked questions. They can be here in 20 minutes. You just have to—" Her hand came up, surprisingly strong, and pushed his away from the wounds. When her eyes opened, they were clear in a way that suggested the white noise emitters had finally died with their operators. She could hear again, could perceive the world in that uncanny way that had kept them alive. "No doctors," she said. Her voice was stronger now. Pain management techniques probably learned in the same facility that had taught her to kill through walls. "Help me up. You've lost a liter of blood. I need to move, now." She was already rising, using the wall for support, leaving bloody handprints on wallpaper that had witnessed 3 centuries of Politano history. "They'll send a cleanup crew. When the strike team doesn't report in, they'll escalate. Next time it won't be operators. It'll be a drone strike or a gas leak or a fire that consumes the whole estate. They can't afford to let me exist." Sandro stood with her, one hand steadying her elbow. "Then you stay. You're under my protection now. The Politano family has resources. We can disappear you properly. New identity, plastic surgery if needed, a compound in Sicily where nobody asks questions. And how many of your people die when they come for me again?" Ariana was moving toward the door now, each step deliberate despite the blood loss. "How many soldiers do you have who can fight what I just killed? How many are willing to die for a woman they don't know, protecting a secret they don't understand?" She stopped at the threshold, one hand braced against the frame. In the distance, police sirens finally wailed their delayed response, local authorities brave enough to investigate only after the shooting had stopped. Sandro had enough of them on his payroll that the investigation would conclude whatever he needed it to conclude. Gas explosion, rival family, terrorist attack. The truth would be buried under paperwork and bribes. But Ariana was right. The government that had created her wouldn't stop. They'd come back with more resources, better planning, and the kind of overwhelming force that couldn't be stopped by even the most skilled operator. Next time, Sophia might not be lucky enough to have someone willing to die for her. "I can pay you," Sandro tried, hating the desperation in his voice. "Name a price, anything. You saved my daughter. In my world, that's a debt that never expires." Ariana turned to look at him, and for the first time since the maid's uniform had come off, he saw something soft in her expression. Almost sad. "You already paid me, Don Politano. You gave me 6 months of pretending to be normal, of singing lullabies and reading stories about horses, of being something other than a weapon." She touched Sophia's hair with surprising gentleness, leaving a small bloody print that the girl wouldn't notice until morning. That was worth more than money. She moved to the window, to the one pane that had somehow survived the battle. Outside, the blizzard had intensified, visibility reduced to a few meters of swirling white. The perfect conditions for someone who navigated by sound rather than sight. "The service entrance," Sandro said, accepting the inevitable. "East Terrace, like you told me. The cameras are dead. No one will see you leave." "No one ever sees me leave, signore. That's the point." She was already moving, and descending the stairs with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for someone who'd been shot multiple times. Her feet made no sound on the marble, that trained silence reasserting itself now that the crisis had passed. Sandro followed with Sophia, compelled to witness the departure, even though he knew he'd never fully understand what he was watching. They reached the east terrace where snow had drifted against the French doors, nature already working to erase the evidence of the night's violence. Ariana paused at the threshold, one hand on the door. "They'll come for her eventually," she said without turning. "When Sophia is older, when they think she might remember something useful about me. You should prepare her. Teach her to be aware, to trust her instincts. I will. It was the only promise he could make that mattered. And she opened the door and stepped into the blizzard. The wind caught her dark hair, whipping it around a face that was already fading into the white curtain of falling snow. Sandro watched her take 3 steps, 4, her form dissolving into the storm as if she'd never existed at all. He counted to 10, then looked at where she'd walked. The snow was unmarked, smooth and pristine, no footprints to indicate which direction she'd gone or that anyone had passed through at all. Either she'd mastered some technique for stepping without leaving impressions, or the blizzard was erasing her trail faster than she could create it. Either way, the effect was the same. The blind nanny who had killed 23 trained operators in a single night had vanished like a ghost, while leaving behind only the bodies and the impossible story that no one outside this house would ever believe. Sophia stirred against his chest. "Where did Miss Ariana go, Papa?" Sandro closed the door against the cold, turning his daughter away from the empty white landscape. "Somewhere safe, Tesoro. Somewhere she can rest." It was the kindest lie he'd told all night. Behind them, the burning helicopter cast its orange glow across the snow, and the sirens grew louder, bringing questions that would need careful answers. But for now, in the space between crisis and aftermath, Sandro held his daughter and listened to the wind howl through broken windows, carrying no trace of the woman who had saved them both. In the morning, the staff would find the bodies. Forensics would come up with theories. Insurance adjusters would calculate damages. But none of them would find a blind woman in a maid's uniform, because Subject Zero had learned long ago how to be invisible in ways that had nothing to do with sight. She was already gone, swallowed by winter, leaving behind only the story of a ghost who had loved a child enough to become human one last time before disappearing forever. The snow continued to fall, erasing everything, the way it always had. If you made it this far, you've just survived the blizzard with Ariana and Sandro. Hit like and the subscribe button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, and comment below. Which scene was your favorite? The blind sniper at the window, the kitchen brawl, the helicopter takedown? Let me know what hit hardest. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.